Ignorance is brief, prepare your organization. My name is Danny Lee. I'm the marketing manager here at Lumeta, and I will be your host today for today's webinar. Today we have speaking Matt Webster, who is Lumeta's Chief Technology Officer, and Bryce Schroeder, who is the Senior Director of Systems Engineering at Tripwire. Before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping notes that I'd like to share with everybody. Please note that the Q&A dialog box on your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them there. We will answer as many questions at the end of the webinar that we can. If we do not get to your question, we will follow up with you via email over the next couple of days. So with that being said, I'm going to throw it over to Matt to kick us off. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, thanks, Danny. Let me start by reiterating what Danny said and thanking everybody for joining. But really want to express my thanks to Bryce and Tripwire. I think both organizations are extremely excited about the technology partnership that was put into place towards the end of 2013 and the work we've done to address kind of the couple of initial use cases. Now, let me preface this conversation that Bryce and I are going to walk everybody through today. We are really focused on a couple of the initial use cases that were identified by both organizations. And really, these use cases are focused on what we hear from our mutual clients in the market in general on really some of the resounding and powerful combination of the technology between the Lumeta product suite and Tripwire's IP360. So getting started, stopping with all the mumbo jumbo, so to speak, we really are focused here at Lumeta on helping organizations close this visibility gap. And this visibility gap materializes itself due to many things that are happening in today's organizations, whether it be cloudification or massive BYOD efforts, et cetera. What we're seeing and what we have seen over the years is a consistent lack of knowledge, a consistent call it shadiness within the enterprise itself. What this visibility gap materializes itself is, are organizations doing all the right things to address their security needs? And we'll get into the specifics of how closing this gap can make organizations feel much more secure about their environment.
Cool. Well, I want to say, Matt, and this is Bryce speaking. So I want to re-echo what Matt just said. And before we walk into this, it's great to start seeing partnerships because I think for you as customers out on the other end of the line, the things that make the biggest difference are the ones where you get incremental value from having solutions that do something better than what they do by themselves. In other words, the things that work better together are ones that add huge value to you. And so it's great to be working with Lumeta, and I think this solution and area that Matt just detailed is pretty important. And before we walk through that, I want to also kind of detail what's happening from an industry standpoint. And I know most of you who are in the security space are very familiar with what came out as the SANS critical security controls. And they highlight a whole set of 20 areas that are ranked from the very most important and critical areas to the lowest. And they go through a whole series of elements that start around identifying and detecting critical assets inside the network. And then the focus of what we're really trying to talk about today is really sitting in the top 20, or not in the top 20, but the top 4. And specifically, we want to look at 3 of those top 4 around, how and to what depth can we identify the hardware assets that are on the network, what's running on them in terms of software content, what they actually are, and then even more important as we walk through that level of criticality, what that means in terms of giving vulnerability, or does this particular IP represent something that I need to be deeply concerned about in terms of either vulnerability or potential exploit in my environment. And the critical element that sits inside of this that both SANS, and now as SANS has handed the critical security control ownership over to the Council on Cybersecurity, is really focused on the concept of what you don't know can hurt you. And that's critical as we walk through this framework style piece and really kind of address, you know, these 3 START events that you see on the piece in terms of coming up with a really good risk security framework and infrastructure. And that's really where we're going to focus is, you know, how do you go see what you've got, what is it that's on it, and then how does that make me more or less vulnerable, and how do I reduce my risk, knowing what I know about the network profile that I have from a situational awareness standpoint.
So thanks for that, Bryce. Before we get into the meat of what we want to talk about today, Bryce and I thought it would make sense for those of you that may not be familiar with one of the other companies that we represent. So a little bit about Lumeta. Lumeta's been around for about a dozen years, primarily focused on providing foundational intelligence to our clients through our product suite, delivering network situational awareness, which is ultimately what SANS is talking about when they talk about A, the top 4 critical controls, and B, the entire stack of 20 critical controls, full stop. We are specifically geared and primarily geared to deliver situational awareness or network situational awareness to large multinational organizations as well as government agencies. And as this effort for delivering situational awareness and addressing the top 4 critical controls, we're seeing our market space expand into the mid-sized and smaller environments.
And now it's a chance to introduce Tripwire. Tripwire has been in the industry for about 16 years and still is known for kind of what we started with, which was file integrity monitoring. However, in the ensuing time, there's been a lot that has changed about us, and we have become really more of a portfolio and suite of critical control process content, really around the file integrity monitoring, file integrity management capability, but more importantly, also around secure configuration management, being able to understand whether change in your environment is good or bad, and who and what's doing that. And we also have enterprise class log and security management capability for log intelligence, as well as now with the Encircle acquisition that happened just 1 year ago, enterprise scale and class vulnerability management. Real intent of where we're headed and why Lumeta's partnership is so good is we really want to provide you as customers business context. So security and key data in the context of your business and how it runs, be able to automate that so that you see large ROI benefit, and then really focus on enterprise scale and integration. Again, with the intent of providing capability and data sets that give you fast reaction time, better scope and intelligence and telemetry of your infrastructure, and really give you the confidence to know that you're secured. So Matt, back to you. Let's talk about the gap.
Yeah, let's talk about the gap a bit. So as Bryce knows and as he's heard from the market in general, and really one of the largest challenges, as he's pointed out, that organizations face is really understanding what is their enterprise. What do I need to secure? What am I concerned with from an integrity standpoint? Being able to close that gap is the focus of the Lumeta product suite, and then of course delivering more broad-based security functionality through our partnership with Tripwire is what our goal is ultimately. But drilling into the numbers a bit, and I've pulled some numbers from some client experiences that we've kicked off in the last couple of months. You'll see across these 4 verticals, these are relatively large organizations. One in particular is extremely large. They all had a lack of knowledge, a lack of visibility around what made up their enterprise. And it's important to note that all of these organizations had a well-established vulnerability management program. whether they were directly addressing the SAN's critical security controls or just generally trying or attempting to do the right things within their enterprise to secure that environment. Now, what this doesn't say is that there's a failing from a vulnerability management standpoint or a product set standpoint, but what we know, we being Lumeta, know that these large complicated organizations that are in continuous motion, continually changing, it becomes very, very difficult for them to get their arms around what is their network. So breaking out these numbers a little bit and understanding them a little bit more deeply, the primary reason for the gap is typically they're not aware of the networks, the actual infrastructure itself that is providing services for the connected endpoints. This includes both IPv4 devices, or networks and devices, as well as IPv6. They just don't have a clear visibility into various corners of the network, so to speak. With that said, this information then materializes and makes its way up into their quote-unquote vulnerability management program, hopefully with the IP360 or Tripwire suite of products, and they're able to properly manage and secure those devices that are truly connected to their environment. Go ahead. So what does the gap really mean? I've kind of touched on this a bit. The network change and the complexity of environments are outpacing any policies and procedures that organizations have. Actually, one of the sales executives at Tripwire said this next bullet to me, which is being compliant simply isn't enough. Checking the boxes isn't about security. Checking the boxes is a box checking exercise. This is about securing the environment, understanding the total environment and being able to properly wrap security around what the reality of the environment is. Of course, organizations can only manage what they know about, manage and secure what they know about. And really, what does this gap of intelligence, what are the problems that it introduces? I think we can all think that through. Bryce will talk about it in a little bit. But this gap of clear visibility, clear intelligence about the environment really can lead to, what I don't know can really hurt me is the fundamental.
Excellent. Well, and Matt, I agree with you absolutely. I mean, it is about being more secure, whether that's walking through the framework for the critical system controls, but really having an understanding of what's on my network, whether it's there on a permanent basis or a transient basis is critically important, because we know now that there are a number of potential threat vectors that are really generated by things that come on and off either physical or Wi-Fi networks. And so having that ability to have a comprehensive, continuous strategy around what's sitting on my network, is it benign or is it malignant, is pretty critically important in terms of what happens.
Great. So let's define network situational awareness a bit. And it's an interesting thing, as Bryce and I were preparing for today's webinar, network situational awareness is a moniker or a tagline that Lumeta has certainly got behind. I think the industry is starting to use this terminology much more readily as they describe being secured, being operationally effective when delivering security across the organization. Interestingly enough, although in Tripwire's case, they certainly talk about situational awareness, the words that we use to describe this problem are on point. We're playing from the same sheet of music. So essentially, and I think Bryce will concur, situational awareness is about closing the gap in network visibility, as I've mentioned a couple of times, to gain that comprehensive knowledge of every connection, device, and potential leak or egress point within the environment. And then ultimately addressing the vulnerabilities and risk associated with the true state of the estate. Really, network situational awareness provides and represents the foundation of comprehensive vulnerability management. And if you think about in military terms, where the term situational awareness really was fostered, there's three buckets, so to speak, on what makes up network situational awareness. Discover. Understand the lay of the land. What's really out there? where are my threat vectors? Where do I have risk? What devices do I have connected to my environment? What networks represent my enterprise? Then there's a level of comprehension. I have the data. Now I need to understand what that data means to me and how it could impact availability, vulnerabilities, etc. That comprehension piece is kind of the linchpin between discovery and finally mitigation. How do I address the risks that have been exposed through this process of delivering network situation awareness and understanding the environment that my remit includes securing. So the 5-step program for effective vulnerability management really is dovetailed by the 3 steps that Bryce pointed out in the SANS CSCs. First, we need to validate the network space. Understand what is my goal? What is my enterprise? What is the network that I need to secure and manage? Moving into the network edge, where are my egress points? Where does my responsibility for security and management end, and it moves into more nebulous regions? And then finally, I need to discover and understand those endpoints that make up my enterprise. This applies both to the internal aspects of our networks as well as those externally facing devices. A clear comprehension of what's the true state of the estate, as I've said, is the goal here. Once we have accomplished those first 3 steps, the Tripwire product steps in.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because once you know what you have or don't have, then we need to know, what is the potential ingress and egress points, to your point, of those particular devices that we have, or gateways that may have appeared. And more importantly than that, it's not just identifying the vulnerability, but it's also the combination of that mitigating risk piece, which is really around, if we know we have something that's vulnerable or a potential exploit, how do we prioritize and automate that prioritization so that we can understand whether or not that truly is a threat vector, and therefore, make sure that we're mitigating those things that are the most important. How do I make sure that, the patches that I'm sending to my operations team is not just useless work, but it really truly is an auto-exploitable, highly privileged gaining remote access potential threat in my overall security program. That's the key, is making sure that we're spending our time fixing the things that provide the most risk to my overall security posture.
Bryce, I think you would agree with me. These 5 steps seem extremely basic and seem very straightforward, and organizations may believe they're doing these things, but I think we're all in agreement, or organizationally we're in agreement. I think you and I individually are in agreement that yes, these steps are being taken, but they may not be effective in the sense that they may not see and have an understanding of the true totality of the environment.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Matt. I mean, the issue that we see over and over again is one of vulnerability fatigue, if you will, because it's a case of, we know that there are issues. They pop up each and every week. Certainly, just in this week, we've seen at least 3 or 4 fairly major pieces come out to the market. Does it really affect me? Do I know that I have that issue? Do I actually have assets and IPs in my environment that this applies to? Because a number of the things that we're seeing are multivariant, and it's not particularly clear. And the issue is, how do I cut into a very clear, concise message that I know if I have this, I can put a remediation plan in place, rather than have the, everything's a 10, everything's a red dot, I've got to go get it all done. That's not the best way to go get there. It has to be, operationally efficient to go remediate and run my vulnerability management program.
Which is a great segue. So let's talk a little bit about the actual integration itself. As I mentioned at the outset of the conversation this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're at, we initially focused on some of the common use cases and primarily focusing on closing that visibility gap that we've, I think, at this point have really pointed out as one of the big drivers for where risk really lies within an environment. So as far as the integration is concerned, as has been mentioned, it's the Lumeta product suite and the IP360 product today, primarily focused on both IPv4 and IPv6 information. I think that can't be understated, the importance of understanding both sides of IP addressing in today's organizations. IP Sonar is certainly finding the networks and devices within a given address space and at 100% level in totality, as has been pointed out. We also are providing additional metadata about endpoints we discover up to the IP360 product. This, of course, makes IP360 much more effective and efficient and comprehensive in their discoveries. The intelligence is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to just finish it off with the intelligence is delivered through our both products' open APIs. Very, very straightforward as it materializes in our product suite.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, the work that we've done together, not just on the API piece, but on making sure that the data exchange is very clean and efficient, is really why the two together work extremely well for kind of giving you that continuous ability in terms of what's there. I mean, but to kid out the rest of what happens from us, I mean, IP360 is very good. It actually provides a profile and identifies the assets so that rather than doing a mass scan like some of our competitors do for each of the IPs that are out there, it literally does, it passes the profile fingerprint, or we create a fingerprint from the IP Sonar discovery and literally just apply the most appropriate level of vulnerability checks and scans to the device once its profile and fingerprint has been completed, so that we can get an entire asset inventory of that particular device, what it contains, what applications it's running, what port and areas it has open or in place, so that we can really give a full view of each of the device profiles that are sitting on the network in totality. And so the real value of this is, one, it's extremely efficient in terms of not just our interaction, but the tripwire piece in terms of profiling the device itself, and then really giving you really great intelligence about what that device is and what the potential risks are given the applications that's running and even the data sets that are sitting on that device. And so what ends up being the result of this integration piece is not just the scalability and deployment capability, but truly a better automated integration and network situational intelligence that gives you fine-grained detail about the network that you have in place. So with that, let's talk a little bit about each of those three areas around being able to discover, comprehend, and really do mitigation. So if we talk about how that works, and we've walked through the context that Matt's talked about in terms of the discover, really what we're doing is a deep but sensitive inspection of each of the devices that are sitting on the network, and then we literally create a stack fingerprint, a set of metadata information about the device itself, the operating systems that it's running, whether it's a host operating system or client, or whether it's a network device like a router or switch or NAS device. But more importantly, revision information of what's there, what's running, which ports are open, so that we get a very comprehensive profile in terms of what that looks like and how it's being built, so that we maintain that piece. And it all comes out in a per asset or per IP device in terms of its exact stack piece. And then there's some other very useful pieces in terms of what's in place. We currently have nearing 90,000 different conditions around profiling not just application vulnerabilities, but also hardware and different software component vulnerability pieces in terms of what's in place. And more importantly, too, with the IP Sonar data in place, we have the ability, since we've got the mobility issues that are in place, of making sure that we have dynamic host tracking. So once we've fingerprinted and profiled the device, if that device moves to another subnet or another place inside of your network, we can actually detect and know that it is the same device with certainty, so that you're not having a point of confusion and role as things move from one place to another. And you can keep your data sets and risk scoring and vulnerability data such that it really tracks what's in place. You don't have confusion or new pieces. And that's really, again, short form, quick version of how we do that discovery. Very efficient, maintains a profile, only scans those things appropriate to the device once it's recognized itself, and then the ability to make sure that you don't lose data or lose context as devices move throughout your network infrastructure or may appear and disappear over periods of time. And then the key piece is that this is really secure data about your particular environment, and that data resides on your premise. It's not something that's exported or driven off-site, so that you're sure that your data is secure to you. And so let's move from discover and talk really quick about how we go through a kind of a comprehension piece. So IP360 has a really critical information suite, and I put the heartbleed blip here down at the bottom for a reason. Focus, if I can use the same word twice, is really around giving you the ability to use business logic on your previous history set. You know what the profile of your network looks like and how it's been changing over time, but it allows you to play what if. And the what if is specific around new things that are coming. Rather than having to go and do another profile and scan event to know whether or not you're vulnerable for the latest application piece. Case in point, just this week, right? I have browsers. I may have dependencies on browsers where there's no patch available, much like the IE patch that hasn't come out yet but was announced this week. But there's multivariant dependencies. It's not just that it's Internet Explorer, but it needs to have an Adobe instance somewhere in place in order for the vulnerability to actually be exploited. So what Focus does is it harnesses the data that you've already created and the profiles of what's already in place and allows you to ask those questions. I want to know all my Windows devices that have Internet Explorer actually installed, and oh, by the way, have an Adobe product in. So you can actually look at potential vulnerabilities before they occur and assess risk. And then the other piece that's really important to that is there is that trend line, that threat line, so that you can see whether or not either intrinsically or intrinsically I'm getting better at that particular subsegment, whether it's a business unit or a particular class of devices like all Windows servers or some other component, whether it's a divisional piece. The other piece that it allows you to do too is to inventory things that are authorized or unauthorized. The component that's on here is really allowing you to say, do I have a device that's been here and disappeared? And if so, does it show back up again at any other point in time? It really allows you to do that kind of what-if query that when the board of directors or the critical folks come down and want to know, what is my potential threat or potential risk, you already have the data in place to really comprehend and get a better grip of what's out in your environment. Next slide, please. So this is the next piece of that, and that is it's a key differentiator in terms of the ability to see what I have. So if you look at normal CVE scoring in terms of what's in place, it really provides you interesting information, but it's a 1 through 10 kind of rate and rank capability. And what you end up with as we build out this slide is really a whole bunch of highs. I've got 10s everywhere throughout my network. What IP360 allows in terms of our vulnerability score is something that's unique in the market. It really structures it based on a 0 through actually above 50,000. And why is that important to you? Well, the reason it's important to you is we're actually doing that scoring not just based on CVE piece, because that is still important in terms of impact to you, but the criteria is also based on how easy is that exploit to take place. Is it automated already? Is there a script kiddie already sitting out on Tor or some other hacker network that's available? We've done that assessment and look for that with our vulnerability team. What's the impact? Does it gain me nothing and just open a port, or does it actually gain me additional privileged access either on the existing system or another system and allow me to do other things? And then other pieces of context around vulnerability age. And then the last piece, I mentioned business context a couple of times. Key in our scoring criteria is the ability for you to provide asset or IP-based ranking. Some assets are more important, or some systems are more important than others. And having that understanding that only you have and the ability to actually rate and rank your own IPs is critically important in terms of determining how important that vulnerability is to you, because critical data is known only to your organization. So then there's the other piece of, we've got comprehension, but how do I perform mitigation? And it's really important as we walk through that communication happens in a way that is important to the audience that it's being seen by, and yet the context of what you're talking about is maintained throughout the organization. So what do I mean by that? So for executives, I want to make sure that I've got the ability to see trends and resources and lines like that. For audit and compliance, I want to know, am I passing, am I failing, am I actually making this piece in place? So pie charts are usually their preferred piece, and what level and across what set of components of my network am I actually in compliance or not. But then as we walk into our capability around security, I want to know more. I want to know, where do I have risk? Where are there issues that may occur that haven't really been remediated yet? And how do I literally put that into a heat map so that I can prioritize the things that are most important? Because when I talk to my operations team, I want to give them those things that are the highest, hottest things to go do. And so I've got a different view and a different system to look at for each of these, but the context of why it's important to have each of these is that they're linked. So if I walk into my executive view, I can drill down, not just on a time frame, but on the asset views of each of these, and the contextual information as to which IP is contributing the most vulnerability, or what class of devices is actually providing the most risk stance, is maintained throughout all of these. So there's a drill down connection. They are not reports sitting in and of themselves. They are literally linked so that comprehension and mitigation can be linked, and therefore when you walk back to the executive team, the trend of what's happening is affected because you can see remediation click all the way around back into the beginning of actually improving your threat posture and your risk stance. So, and critically important that you can actually see things walk through. And then the last piece, I wanted to drill down on one of those charts that we had on the security piece. So again, it's important from our standpoint that we not only give you automation and the ability to actually remediate well, but also the intelligence to know that what you're doing is the most important. So the heat map on the right is actually a subsegment of each of those trend lines, which are on the left that you can hardly see, but each of those is a risk stance of each division. And you can see over time, some are getting better, as noticed by the blue line in place, and some are getting worse. And that's the red piece along the mix. But each of them has this same heat mapped scoring mechanism, which you see on the right-hand side of the screen, where I'm really trying to focus on, is this an automatable exploit on the y-axis, and then what is the privilege, what is the impact of that actual exploit being on my system, so that when I walk up to the number in the upper right corner with the hottest color in place, I know that I'm actually focusing my efforts on those things that do represent the highest risk and potential threat to my environment. That's the key core so that I can really focus my teams in the right places. So to really start wrapping and kind of closing out in terms of what we've done, we've talked about kind of what is network situational awareness, where does the gap exist, and really the key component of that is knowing what's on my network, the devices that are there, where is the edge and the boundary, where do I have loops or holes in terms of what's in place around profiles. And then we've talked quite a bit about comprehension, and scoring's important. Why is scoring important? Because knowing what is the most critical in my environment and having the understanding of how to prioritize what I attack first can make the largest difference in terms of reducing my risk and really providing true mitigation in terms of what's in place. And then the other piece, which we roll right back around to back into discovery again, is as I'm doing this process, as I'm walking through this piece, if I've reduced and made changes, then I need to make sure that I still have my stance where I'm continuing to look at my network on a continuous basis and knowing what's changed and what hasn't, so that I can go back and reassess my vulnerability and risk stance and truly prevent intrusion kind of as I move forward. Matt, would you agree or disagree? What do you think?
I completely agree. In fact, I'm laughing to myself on this side of the phone that this is an arrow, of which looks like there's a start and an end, but really this should be a circle. This network situational awareness tagline or effort is continually in process, or should be continually in process within organizations. Exactly what you have stated, Bryce. So going back to 50,000 feet, just to sum up what we've discussed about today, really the partnership between Tripwire and Lumeta are focused in really 4 different areas that we've highlighted during our 40-minute conversation. Eliminating the gaps in network intelligence, shining a light on the dark corners of the network, clearly understanding what's attached, what devices make up my environment, maximizing that control through these visibility efforts, through pure raw discovery and comprehension. And then finally, enhancing my security posture based on this true set of facts, the totality of my environment, through the IP360 product, and then finally, reducing my overall organization's risk. Being able to address both zero-day as well as those long-term trending risks that we can drive down within our organization.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Bryce. That was great, very informative. Now we're going to switch over to some Q&A. We do have several questions from the audience. So let me start out by throwing one over to Matt. Here's one question, Matt. My organization has both products. Who should I talk to about implementing the integration?
Well, certainly you could talk to Bryce or myself, but I think that the right recommendation is talk to the field team rep that handles your account. And in both cases, if you wanted to talk to Lumeta or wanted to talk to Tripwire, they can point you in the right direction on both sides of the equation.
Okay, great. This is actually kind of a follow-up question to that first one. Is there a cost associated with integrating the products?
Not typically, no. The integration just is there. If you wanted to do additional work or efforts around maybe something specific for your organization, a use case specific to your organization, that's a conversation to have with, again, your account team.
Okay, and this is, I guess, kind of another question in that same vein. Let me throw it over to Bryce. The question here, Bryce, is if I want to have this done as a turnkey solution, can I and how?
Sure. So that's good because I didn't want Matt to hog all the questions. So our professional services team at Tripwire has done a number of these. We also have partners that can do it. I would echo what Matt said in terms of talking to the account team, but we do have trained, capable folks on the Tripwire side, and I know on Lumeta's side as well, but also in a number of partners that have done integrations and will do full turnkey capability with the product so that you can reap the benefits of the entire solution suite.
Great. Yeah, and I think kind of along those lines, just from a very technical standpoint, the primary quote-unquote code or the linchpin that holds the integration together does live on the IP360 side of the equation. There's small bits within the IP Sonar product suite or the Lumeta product suite. Some of the work on the Lumeta side is to make sure the discovery and the scanning and intelligence gathering effort is properly geared to feed this integration.
Yeah, and I would throw two more cents in there. It literally is as easy as turning on the API in IP360.
That's right.
and putting in the connection for the feed. It really is. There's very little to be done to be able to make that happen.
Right.
If there are things you want to do from an efficiency standpoint, to the point that the person asked about turnkey, certainly we've got consultants and folks that can help with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. And Bryce, here's a question that is probably a continuation as well. Are there specific industries and applications where this solution is a requirement or best suited for?
Yeah, so I mean, this partnerships has developed over several years, and really we see a lot of it now, and has been done with a lot of the Fed perimeter definition pieces, where you need federal organizations in the U.S. need very clear defined interfaces in terms of their network capability and the ability to have continuous intelligence about what that looks like. But we're seeing a lot of other places too where this same type of solution is becoming a real requirement. Specific things around the NERC piece, around energy, where you've got a very different set of profile of devices, SCADA devices, programmable logical controllers that are sitting with IPs on the network that are not your normal type of device, but recognition and understanding of who they are and what they're doing is critically important to make sure that you don't have a point where they can actually be breached or compromised in terms of their information data, because the things that they're controlling are literally of national concern in terms of power distribution, grid management, distribution of oil, gas, and other energy sources. So we're seeing a lot of interest in the NERC space. And the other space that's really coming of late is really in the financial markets. There is a new guised as a compliance spec that's coming out literally in July around Monetary Authority of Singapore. And what they're really trying to go drive is a continuous monitoring, continuous network, continuous transactional policy around security and risk mitigation. And their requirements are things like, if I've had a security incident, I need to report. Either network or incident or change, I need to report within an hour. Only way to actually do that effectively and be able to give the forensic data necessary to follow up with is to have a continuous network intelligence stance, as well as continuous change management and continuous security management capability inside of your environment. So there are a number of places where this is becoming critically important. And then, of course, we've got all of our, different breach efforts that this is starting to become, the way that will be protected against is really to have a continuous stance. So yes, there's a number of places where this is becoming the norm and not the exception.
Great. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Matt. We actually have time for one more question, and I'm going to take it myself since it's an appropriate question to end on. Where can I get additional information on the Lumeta and Tripwire integration? There is a joint solution sheet on both of our websites at lumeta.com and at tripwire.com, but I will also be sending it out in the follow-up to this webinar. So if you're an attendee of the webinar, you will be receiving a link to that solution sheet. If not, please feel free to check out our website for that joint integration solution sheet. So on that note, I'd like to thank Bryce and Matt again for a great job, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody down the road. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks. Thanks, Bryce.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Matt. Take care.
Bye.